Hello, James Moffat here. Please go to parentingadultchildren.org website and sign up for a free membership and leave a review for this episode. If you have any requests for future topics, send me an email at talkpac@proton.me. That's talkpac@proton.me. Please share this podcast with your friends and family. Now for today's guest interview.
Welcome to the podcast ABCs of Parenting Adult Children. Please join us as we discuss parenting adult children and the unique struggles that it comes along with.
Hello and welcome to ABCs of Parenting Adult Children podcast. My name is James Moffat, and I'll be your host. Today we have Andrea Pollack. Is that correct?
Yes, correct. Thank you.
Andrea, thanks for being here. Hey, do me a favor and introduce yourself to the listening audience.
Thank you so much. My name is Andrea Pollack. I am a parenting educator and coach. I do tend to focus on parents of autistic and neurodivergent children.
Okay, that's awesome. So I'm going to read this little blurb out of your profile. It says, Andrea's transition from law to homeschooling her autistic son offers insights into adaptive parenting. This episode could focus on strategies Andrea's developed to manage parenting stress, mindset shifts, and the innovative approaches she now teaches to empower parents of children with autism. And we have had several guest speakers on our podcast that talk about neurodivergence. And my wife's a special ed teacher, so she's very familiar with all of this. And I'm sure that we have a lot of parents out there that have special needs children, that have different things going on. I don't want to say anything negative, right? I mean, but anyway, we have, I don't want to use the word handicap, or how would you say it?
Well, the word that tends to be favored is disability.
Right.
But I think that people have the right to decide whether they identify as disabled or not, right?
Right. Got you. And all our kids are special. We love all our children, no matter what color they are, no matter what age they are, no matter what challenges they face. Maybe challenges is the word I should have used. And so our hope is that parents listening to the podcast episode can find the resources that they need to face every day and take care of their kiddos the best way they can, right? So tell me a little bit about your parenting story.
Sure. So I was a lawyer, and
Right.
I did that for 19 years. My son at the time was young, and I couldn't really find a school that could serve him at the time. So I decided to leave my career and homeschool him. And I was in way over my head. I really didn't know what I was doing, but what I knew was that I wanted to create a connection. I wanted to create understanding. I really felt like the advice I was being given by teachers or by professionals wasn't really working for us.
Right.
So I decided I would homeschool him, which I did for 8 years.
Wow.
It wasn't the plan going in, but it turned out I knew it was the right, I knew what he needed and when he was ready to go back to school. And when he went back to school, I also went back to school and got a master's in education so that
wow.
I could help other parents in the most effective way possible.
Well, if you are an attorney, and you left your job, your career, to take care of your son, that speaks a lot of you, in that you made that decision. That was a tough decision. I'm sure it wasn't made lightly, and I'm sure that you are the finances that had to be thought about and all of that. It was a huge transition. Can you talk a little bit about that transition and what some of the challenges you faced, maybe?
Sure. It was a hard decision because I really did love my career and I was 19 years into it, and homeschooling my son was not in my plans, but I don't know. I felt it inside of me that it just needed to happen.
Right.
I weaned off a little bit. I did go to part-time first, and then I left completely.
I got you.
And then, another really difficult challenge for me at the time was I was really good at being a lawyer, and I was really not good at being a homeschooling parent at first because I really didn't know what I was doing. So having that feeling every day of like, I don't know what I'm doing and I don't think I'm doing a good job, that was hard in the beginning. But I
Right.
just trusted that if I just kept going, we would figure it out together.
That's wonderful. So you were the best advocate for your son, right?
I think that's true of all parents.
That's right. That's right. And I've heard multiple stories by guests that have been on my podcast of how the educational system and the professionals, the educators, and the different healthcare providers that are diagnosing children with whatever it is they're diagnosing them with. And I don't think that I'm not a healthcare professional, so I'm just kind of talking here, right? But I'm thinking that not every diagnosis fits every child 100%, right? Every child's unique, every child's different, every child is struggling with different things, right? And so you being the advocate for him, you are best prepared to have those conversations with the healthcare providers, and obviously, they're professionals and we certainly want their input as to what's going on with our children. However, you live with your family, you live with your son day in and day out, and you know his environment, you know his struggles, you know what it is that he needs to, you know, progress forward in life and be the best person that he can be when it's all said and done, right?
Right. Well, I think a really important point that I try to help parents understand is it's not just that you're the best advocate for them with professionals, but there's so much that you do teach them that you can do to help them. We don't have to leave it all in the hands of professionals. I agree
Right.
with you. I'm incredibly grateful for all of the professionals who helped us along the way. I learned so much from them. My son learned so much from them, but there were things that I did as a parent that were parenting that,
Right.
that were not what they were specialists in. And through parenting, I do think there's so much we can do to build our children's self-esteem, to help them learn daily living skills, to help them, to shape them into the adults they're going to be. So it's not just about, I do think parents sometimes feel desperate to get that professional help, which is important, but don't discount what you can do as a parent.
Right. Well, and that's our role as parents, right? Is to pass along, our experiences, our life experiences. We teach them skills, that they probably should not be getting elsewhere, right? We teach them the value of the dollar. We teach them patience. We teach them how to love. We teach them how to be compassionate. All of those things that all of us need. We all need, looking at the world we live in, we all need a little more compassion, right? A little more forgiveness, a little more empathy, a little more objectivity, et cetera, right? So,
right.
So
and
yeah.
I get why when you have an autistic or otherwise neurodivergent child, that feels like you don't know how to do it, right? Because they don't necessarily respond in the same way, and it's sometimes hard to reach them. So I understand that, and my message is really to get that, but also you can't, just keep trying, just keep,
right.
Relating, just keep trying to understand them. That's the thing that I think parents can do most effectively. And I also don't mean, just because I homeschooled my son, I'm not saying that parents should homeschool their children, that's always the right choice. But I'm saying that
right.
in the time that you are with them, there's so much value that you give them. So trust yourself. I'm trying to give a message of positivity and hope.
Right.
Not, judgment in any way, of course.
Yeah, we're not sitting here making a blanket statement that the educational system is a total failure,
No, definitely
and that's
not.
why we're homeschooling our kids. That's not the message, right? And
not at all.
I'm in South Carolina. I think we rank 48. Our educational system needs a revamping. Somebody needs to rip that thing apart and fix it, whatever that is, right? But anyhow, yeah, my wife and I homeschooled our children for, 10 or 12 years. And I think that was our decision at the time. My wife stayed at home, and, I was the sole breadwinner in the family, and she taught the children and worked on her master's degree. She's a crosscat special ed teacher now, and she's been doing it for 25 years. And so I'm kind of a proponent of homeschooling. I think that if families are able to do that, then that might be, it's an avenue that you can explore anyways, right?
Yeah.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hey there, James here, James Moffat. I wanted to let you know about our current sponsors. These people sponsor the podcast financially and help to underwrite the cost of producing this podcast. And I want to say thank you to them. So Michael Evan Blair is with When in Doubt, SpinItOut.com. Richard Jones is with SecondStarts.com. Addiction Recovery Program. Jonathan Nall, he's the author of Final Approach or FinalApproach.com. Kenny Dupar, author of Scoundrels in Iraq. Scott Yamamura, author of Financial Epiphany. Mary Toko is a vocal advocate for vaccine education and parental rights. Andrew Ryan Profaci is a cult and cancer survivor and the author of The War on Love. Melissa Crook is a podcast guest, and she is the insightful and compassionate host of the Feel, that's F.E.E.L podcast. All right. Thank you for listening to this. And now back to your feature presentation.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it is an individual family choice, because I do think that also there are some kids who do really well in school, like who do really advance and grow and do all kinds of wonderful things. What I'm trying to share is also that sometimes we get very nervous because there aren't sufficient services where we live. And we feel like if we don't get those services, then our children aren't going to get what they need. And while I'm not saying that's an easy circumstance, parents can give them so much of what they need. Like you don't have to feel, hopeless, because there's so much you can do. Even if they are in school, you're with them more hours of the week than their teachers are. So there's so much value that we can give to their education. Education being broad, I don't mean like letters and numbers, just I mean in terms of what you were talking about.
Sure. Well, it takes a village, right? It takes all of us. We all have a part in helping to raise our children, and the role of a parent is to evaluate and to make judgment calls on the types of instruction that our children are getting, whether it be from public school, whether it be from social media, whether it be from professional services, what have you, and it's our job to evaluate those things and make the correct decisions. And that's scary. It's not an easy thing. Right. And because you parents, you're like, oh my God, am I going to make a mistake? Was that the wrong decision? We're always second guessing ourselves with regards to the things that we're doing and saying to our children, right?
Yep, that's true.
So how did your legal career shape your parenting approach?
Oh, that's such a good question. I guess a big part of it was, I was trained to look beneath the surface, right?
Right.
Because when we make decisions based on what we see on the surface, sometimes it's not the most effective decision. And I think that discipline helped me look at my son and try to figure out the why underneath what he was doing, right? So, at the time, there was a lot of support there was a lot of behaviorism being taught, right? Let's address the behaviors. And I think what I started to realize in that moment was I have to see why the behaviors are happening and address that, right? Like for him, it felt to me like addressing behavior was like, you get a splinter and you put a Band-Aid on it. The splinter's still there. Right. So until you take the splinter out, you're not going to have an effective solution. And it required me to really, as I said, look more deeply and really understand him. So that I would say that's a big part of it. And I think actually in some ways, I had to really unlearn some of what I learned as a lawyer to be a parent, because what I learned in my legal career was push harder, do more, burn at both ends kind of thing. Whereas being a parent is more about really tapping into the emotional piece. Sometimes slowing down is what you need to do instead of pushing harder. So that I would say that there's both ends on that.
Gotcha. What key mindset shifts help in managing parenting stress? Stress kills, right?
Yes. And this is so important. And this is why I love the opportunity to speak to your audience. You're talking about adult children, because recently I have had a lot of parents of young adult children approach me, young adult autistic children, saying they really need help. Like it was okay. It was all, they were getting by until this stage, and now it's not working. And the mindset shift is to really believe that your child doesn't want to be misbehaving. Your child doesn't want to be not meeting expectations. That if your child could meet the expectations, they would. So what we want to do is learn how to support them to meet expectations instead of punishing them, because punishing them isn't going to help them, fill the gaps in either their skills or meet their needs to
Right.
meet expectations. So that's what I would say is the major mindset shift. They don't want to be misbehaving, for lack of a better word. They don't want to be
Right.
not meeting expectations. And so many times parents just attribute it to laziness. They attribute it to defiance. And even if some of those things are also present, there's a reason why they're doing that instead of meeting expectations. So we have to
Right.
dig below the surface.
Yeah, I think a lot of parenting has turned into performance-based sort of thing. I mean, I remember when I was a child, my parents were, if you follow these set of rules and you do all these set of rules, you'll be successful and you'll be a good boy. If you don't follow these set of rules, then you're going to get into trouble and you'll be a bad boy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there was a little bit of truth to some of that, but I think the thing I would like to highlight about what you said was punishing. And I think it's correct in that neurodivergent children, young adults, when I'm talking adult children, I'm talking from, the age of 18 to 30, thereabouts.
Mm-hmm.
And I think between 18 and 30, depending on their mental development and where they're at mentally, I think our children want to do right. I think they want to do good, and I think they want to be validated. They want to be seen. They want to be heard. And so I think it's important that, every child's on their own path, their own journey, right? And none of us, even those of us that are not neurodivergent, we're on our journey too. We're on our path. And like I'm 63 and I'll be 64 this year. And I learn something new every day, and
Absolutely.
on my journey, maybe there's some things I've learned in the last decade that maybe I should have learned back when I was 30 or 40, right? I don't know. But, it took me until I was in my 60s to learn some of these things, right? Whatever those things are, right? We all mature and we all obtain wisdom and different types of skills, right? And so we're all different, all of us. And I think I heard somebody say that we're all on the autism spectrum in some way, at some shape, form, or fashion. We're all kind of on the, all of us can be to a certain degree on the autism spectrum. I don't know if that's true or not. That's just what I heard.
Yeah,
So this is not.
I wouldn't necessarily agree with that, only because I don't want it to disrespect people who are autistic, who encounter the world in a different way than the majority of people, which makes it extra hard for them. That's all. You know what I mean? It can anyway.
That's true.
But, I think getting back to young adult children, I do think that's part of why parents at that age, and you're right, it's not just neurodivergent children, but the ones who come to me tend to be, they've been able to use, punishment and consequences and things like that as strategies to get their children to keep advancing. And at a certain point, it stops working because you can't punish your 18. There's nothing to punish them with, right? And it's not too late either. But what we really need to do is understand what's causing the breakdown, because there are solutions to whatever it is, but we have to identify it first. And I agree with you totally. They want to be seen. They want to be understood. They want to be heard. They want to be valued and validated. So we need to do that, because that's our best chance to find a solution to whatever the breakdown is.
Right. Very good. So can you share unconventional parenting strategies you've developed?
I wouldn't say, maybe they're not unconventional strategies. It's just not the conventional ones, meaning, we don't use, I'm not saying that punishment is never appropriate, because that's another thing. Sometimes parents are like, well, but if they intentionally break something, there are moments where it might be appropriate, but as a regular strategy, I think, as I said before, it's just not going to teach them the thing that they're missing. But I also help parents understand the importance of managing their own self-regulation, right? And what, one dysregulated person can't regulate another. So oftentimes our children are having, an issue and they're becoming dysregulated when they do. And when we become dysregulated to try to force them to do something or yell, whatever it is, it's not helping them. And when I talk to parents about this, they're like, wow, we've never been taught we've never been taught the whole concept of regulation. But really, I help parents learn how to manage their own regulation. I want them to feel all their feelings. That's really important. But they don't
Right.
have to do it in the moment when their children need them the most. They can set them aside for a little bit and come back to them.
Right.
So we work on that. I help parents understand really what it means to meet your children where they are and to set them up for success. So, and that has to do with helping them learn how to set expectations at just the right level. Because oftentimes parents set them really high, which is great. We want our children to meet high expectations, but setting them too high, way above what they're able to achieve is like throwing your child who can't swim into the deep end and just seeing what happens, right? They're going to freak out. They're not going to learn.
It's going to create frustration and stress
for everyone.
Yes.
So really helping parents understand how to figure out what their child is able to do. And then we do want to keep, increasing expectations, but in increments that our children can actually tolerate and use to learn. There are more, but these are the kinds of strategies strategies and perspectives, I would say, that I help parents learn in their toolbox. Instead of, most of them come to me, they really only have punishment and consequences.
I got you. Well, and as we've said on this podcast multiple times, we parent our children the way we were parented. It's hard baked into our psychology and our physiology too. Well, this is how our parents did it, and so this is how I'm going to do it. And I learned when we got married and had children, we're celebrating 35 years of marriage this month.
Congratulations.
On the 12th. She hasn't killed me yet. But my dad was a drill instructor and my mother was Austrian, and they were both heavy authority figures, and they had the punishment part down pretty well, consequences and punishment, right? And when my wife got married and we started having children, I recognized the emotional baggage and garbage that I had brought into the relationship, much less into parenting, right? And so I think James Dobson was one of the Christian psychologists that I listen to a lot, and his teachings helped me to reprogram some of the negative stuff that I had learned about parenting from my parents, right? So emotional intelligence, self-care, all of that stuff's important, right? And
Absolutely.
It's not selfish to practice self-care. And we talk about that with regards to moms a lot on this podcast, because moms carry a huge burden many times when it comes to raising our children, right? I think that's evolving some, which is good. I think dads are becoming more and more involved in the raising of the children today than they were, let's say, back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, right? And so, my message to parents, dads and moms, it's like you said, self-regulate. It's okay for you to step back and go, hey, why am I reacting this way? Why is this irritating me? Why am I reacting the wrong way? Why am I lashing out or being angry or frustrated or, whatever it might be, and there's a lot of emotions involved there. And so, yeah, self-care is very, very important as a parent.
Yeah. And, I wanted to stack on what you were talking about in terms of we parent the way we were parented, which is so true. But also, if you think about it, that's the way school works too, right? That teachers use consequences and punishment and threats with children. That's how that works too. So, and this is related to what I was talking about before, where I was saying that, parenting and teaching are different, right? I think it's okay in the school context for it to work that way because it's one teacher to many children, and it might be that they have to address the behavior as they see it. But for parents, we have the ability and the time and the relationship to go below and figure out, why is this happening, right? To have a greater understanding of our children. And it all factors in. It's, the teaching part is important for our children. They do have to learn that there are consequences to your actions, and that's not a bad thing. But they also need parenting. They also need understanding and support.
Right. Absolutely. How does your program uniquely address both parent and child needs?
Well, like I said, we really start with self-regulation of the parent, really helping parents break those habits of, expressing anger in the moment, or frustration or any of those challenging feelings of becoming escalated in the moment. And I also tell parents, be nice to yourself too. It's okay. But if you want to do it differently, here's how you can do that. And it's really about really interrupting that impulse and realizing it's not happening to you, that you do have some control over it. So, we start actually with the parents because the parents have the most control over themselves. They can be the change agent for their families. And so parents often come to me and they're like, tell me what to do with my child. And I said, we're going to totally talk about that. And there are strategies, but it's also about how you can parent differently. Again,
Right.
This is not about blame or anything else. This is about hope and opportunity. How
Right.
can we do things differently to help foster growth instead of oftentimes there's so much conflict because, the children aren't meeting expectations and the parents are addressing that with punishment or discipline. Yeah, so we start with the parents. We really focus all the way through on what could you do differently next time to help have a different outcome.
Right. And
Which is empowering.
I bet for some parents that's kind of an eye-opening experience, right? Like, what do you mean we need to talk about me first? Because I think as parents, we feel like we're the authority figure, right? We feel like we are the, not really the authority figure, but you know what I'm saying? We feel like we're the parent. We know
Right.
what we're supposed to be doing, and so sometimes you have to step back and go, oh wait, maybe I can improve my parenting skills, and maybe I
Yes.
can approach these situations a little softer or whatever needs to happen, right?
Right. And, what I try to share with parents is this should feel empowering. I'm not blaming parents for anything they're doing, but it's more because when all of the power rests in your child's behavior, when we're dependent upon them to change, we have very little power in that, right? If we look at it that way. If we look at it as I can do things differently to help my child, experience life differently, it's very
Right.
empowering. And it's not power over, it's power to create the collaboration that doesn't yet exist.
Gotcha. All right. So I want to give you 3 or 4 minutes for an elevator speech and for you to talk to the listening audience and tell them whatever it is you would like to tell them.
Wow. Thank you. Let's see. Well, I would like to tell them that, I want them to embrace a new way of thinking about parenting, that it isn't all about forcing your children to follow the rules and making them do things, right? We want to create the relationship and collaboration that helps them want to do things. It feels better for everyone. I also, when I first started my program, I thought it was about educating parents, but I quickly learned that there was a coaching component that really was very important as well, because you can learn, you can read in a book some strategies, but if your internal conditioning, right, like what you were talking about in terms of, right, how we were raised, if it conflicts with that, we're not going to be effective in doing it. And so what I help parents do is really look inside themselves and try to figure out and understand why they are responding the way they respond.
Right. I got you.
So I do think that parent coaching can be extremely valuable if you are open to it and it's available to you. And I think that there's just so much parents can do to help our children, and it doesn't have to feel hard. It doesn't have to feel like we have to go get like a PhD in parenting or anything like that. When I first left my law job, I was playing on the floor with my son. I had no idea what I was doing, and I did not have a playful bone in my body. I had to learn. I didn't. I was a lawyer for 19 years. Any play was sent
Playing's
right
not
out of
allowed,
me.
right?
Right. So I had to figure it out. And, I just did it by following my instincts and trusting that I'd get better at it the more I did it, prioritizing, trying to understand him, which until that point, the professionals I had been working with, the key wasn't in understanding it. It was trying to shape the behavior. I really, And parents do know their children. When I work with parents, one of the things that comes up very quickly is, that they're like, well, that is what I thought. That is how I would want to do it. But my parents' teacher said, do it some other way. So it turns out they had really good instincts and they were allowing them to be overridden by external forces.
Gotcha. That's good stuff. Well, Andrea, I appreciate you being on the podcast episode today. You bring a lot of good stuff to the table. And I hope that listening audience gets something out of this. And you can listen to this podcast, or to the listening audience. I want to say thank you for the privilege of your time. You can listen to the podcast episode on Captivate FM, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and Public Radio. I also upload the video version of this episode, to rumble.com. And our website is located at parentingadultchildren.org. That's parentingadultchildren.org. You can go there and you can get my contact information, upcoming show schedule, and a place to leave a review for this podcast episode. Also, if you, I think about 88% of the people that listen to the podcast are on Apple devices, iPads, iPhones, et cetera, et cetera. And if you're on Apple Podcasts listening to an episode, you can actually leave a review right there as you're listening to the podcast. So please leave a review. I'd appreciate that. And Andrea, do you have a website that you would like to tell people about?
I do. Thank you so much for asking, giving me the opportunity. My website is autismparentsolutions.com. And on the website, you can learn more about me, about my approach, my program. You can read some testimonials from other parents who've gone through it. And I have a lot of free resources there as well. I have a YouTube channel, also under Autism Parent Solutions, where I do lots of videos designed to just help you with a combination of the mindset and strategy.
Awesome. That's really good stuff. Thank you. All right. So to the listening audience, I'll say thank you for listening and have a wonderful day, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Please tune in next week for another episode of our podcast on parenting adult children.